Hey, happy to have you back. In this lesson, we're going to look at how our culture defines responsibility, and you'll get to decide if you want to make its definition your own, or if you'd prefer to define it in a different way. Let's dive in. So now that you can start to feel the power in your perspective, I want to pose an important question. And that is, if we all want to feel free so bad, if we're all yearning for this, what is it that seduces us to put on our bondage lenses? Why isn't freedom more seductive? Any thoughts? It boils down to one word. Any thoughts? Say that again? No, but if anyone would know the word, it would be you, because you've said it before. Not to put you on the spot. Did you guys see on the computer? I heard you whispering. Yeah. Should. Bondage's seduction is should. Should will always pull you down. I know, should. Okay, so why is it that should is so seductive? It's because it relates to responsibility in our culture. That's what we label responsible. So we think responsible. I really missed my spell check, guys. Okay, so one of our definitions of responsibility currently in our culture is should. Agreed? So let's break this down a little bit. We're going to dive deep into what we're really defining responsibility as. So if we go back to this quadrant, if we agree that one of our definitions of responsibility is should, agreed? One of our and that should doesn't belong here but belongs here. Would you agree? So then what that implies is that we think being in bondage is responsible. And we also think being exhausted and depleted is responsible. And if you're not exhausted and depleted, then feeling anxious and guilty about it is responsible. Agreed? You guys can cue when you need a breath. Yeah. Okay, so look at our current definition of responsible. We're going to keep going. Should, in bondage, exhausted, depleted, anxious, and guilty. Now, since we've agreed that the dreaded drama triangle is in bondage, then it would also be true that we think it's responsible to be in drama, to be a persecutor, rescuer, or victim. It's only logical. So we'll add those. Drama. Persecutor. Victim. What was the third one? Rescuer. Now we're going to take this even further. David Emerald, the guy who has the dreaded drama triangle, if you remember, this is one of his quotes from the drama side. Frozen in fear, you avoid responsibility because you think your experience is beyond your control. This stance keeps you from making decisions, solving problems, or going after what you want in life. So if this is all logical, then part of our definition of responsibility is avoiding responsibility. Responsibility. It's pretty effed up. He also mentioned fear. And let's talk about that. He said frozen in fear. Are you guys familiar with fight or flight? Yeah. So what it is called as well is fight, flight, or freeze. And if you aren't familiar with it, it's basically our human tendency, because we're an animal, to protect ourselves from predators. So it's been something that, it's the way our brain is wired, essentially. And when we detect a predator, our body literally starts pumping blood away from our internal organs and pumps it to all our extremities so that we can either fight the predator or run from the predator, but sometimes the fear takes over and we just freeze, okay? So it has literal, intense biological consequences. Think about it. If your blood is literally going away from your internal organs, not a good thing. Think about it in terms of digestion. This is why stress affects digestion so, it's so sensitive to stress, I should say, your digestive tract. It's hard for anything to get digested if your blood is being pumped away, which is why in the scientific world they call the opposite of fight or flight, they call it rest and digest. Just a clever name, because you can actually calm down and digest, okay? So the issue is that maybe worked for us when we were quote unquote cavemen and a literal tiger came and we really had to decide if we were going to fight or flee from it. The issue in our culture right now is that our predators are not tigers. Our predators are work and family issues and traffic. So our predators are things that are coming at us all the time. We can't run away from them, okay? So that's the issue. The way I see it relating to our 4 quadrants is here we have fight. This action is flight, and this action is freeze. Does that make sense? So, part of our definition is to do one of those things, apparently. To fight or freeze or flee, which would be the same as avoiding responsibility. So it's getting kind of weird, right? Our definition of responsible is should, it's avoiding responsibility, it's bondage, all these things. And you may be saying, okay, I get the point you're trying to make, but don't you think it's just responsible sometimes to get shit done, Annalisa? Like, you just got to get work done, right? And if you're thinking that, I get the point you're trying to make. So the way I'll respond to you is by something one of my clients shared with me, and it comes from Seth Godin, and it's his definition of modern laziness. He says, the original kind of lazy avoids hard physical work. Too lazy to dig a ditch, organize a warehouse, or clean the garage. Modern laziness avoids emotional labor. This is the laziness of not raising your hand to ask the key question, not caring about those in need, or not digging in to ship something that might not work. Lazy is having an argument instead of a thoughtful conversation. Lazy is waiting until the last minute. Lazy is avoiding what we fear. Lazy feels okay in the short run, but eats us up over time. Comfort, discomfort, versus the other way around. Laziness is often an option, and it's worth labeling for what it is. So I love that thought, and I think similar to the idea of fight or flight, in this case it's biology, but we're kind of bringing a old version of ourselves into our current modern society. And I think that's what we've done with the word lazy. In the past, would it have been lazy, for everyone else in your family to work on the farm and you to not, and have chores not get done or animals not get fed? Yeah, that would have been pretty lazy. But we don't live in that world anymore. We have automation and we have outsourcing, we have technology. We don't have to do physical labor the way we used to in order to get the stuff done that needs to get done. And so to not redefine it would, I think, be unwise, because if you look at the true havoc that's being wreaked in your life, is it because of physical work not getting done? Or is it because of emotions not being processed? In the past, it maybe would have been physical work. If you didn't have somebody keeping up with the things that needed to get done, you may not have enough food for the winter a couple hundred years ago. It's not the case anymore. The problems that we experience are primarily a result of not processing our emotions correctly. And by correctly, I just mean in a healing way. Doing vicious cycles instead of actually getting things resolved. So if that definition, if that definition of lazy makes sense to you, meaning modern laziness avoids emotional labor, let's look at all this. Do these descriptions look like someone who is avoiding emotional labor or who is processing emotional labor? Avoiding. And so we'll end our current definition of responsible with the label lazy. So take a second to breathe this in. Bondage's seduction is strong. It pulls us down. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Look at all the dysfunction that's underneath when you really look at this in a logical way. This is a dysfunctional definition of responsible. Should we find a new definition? Yeah. And you'll love this. You'll love this. Quit shitting all over yourself. Come on now, people. Okay, here we go. Let's make this one bolder. It's better, that's why. We'll just add a little happy face here. Okay, so we're basically just going to do some 180 flips. What we had for the completely dysfunctional definition to the more functional, and we're going to start with should. I love this quote from Louise Hay. She says, "I believe that should is one of the most damaging words in our language. Every time we use should, we are in effect saying wrong. Either we are wrong or either we are wrong. I have some typos in here. Either we are wrong or we are going to be wrong or we were wrong. I don't think we need more wrongs in our life. We need to have the freedom of choice. I would like to take the word should and remove it from the vocabulary forever. I'd replace it with the word could. Could gives us choice, and we are never wrong." So let's do a 180 from should to could. The same way should pulls us down, could pulls us up. Could is a word that comes from the freedom side. So if we're doing a 180 shift from should to could, and we're feeling better about this being our definition of responsibility instead of this side, then I think we could add free. Instead of bondage. It's responsible to cultivate a perspective of freedom. If we are thinking about the dreaded drama triangle, and trying to think what we put here. Oh, yes. We said that we were, according to David Emerald's definition, when you're in fear, you're actually avoiding responsibility. So I would like to think of responsible as embracing responsibility. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? You're embracing your choice, and therefore you're actually embracing your responsibility. It's just funny. Someone who is responsible would be someone who practices embracing responsibility. But in our culture, we're defining someone who is responsible as someone who avoids it. True responsibility. We've got some things to work out in our culture, people. And if we think about the shift from the dreaded drama triangle to then the empowerment dynamic, we could say that responsible is empowered. I would even include the word dynamic. And I would certainly include challenger, or even challenging, creator, and coach. And someone who, of course, is not lazy according to Seth Godin's definition, but someone who not only embraces responsibility, but maybe similarly said, a similar idea said differently would be embraces emotional labor. And because we know from our last lesson that emotions are a result of your perspective, you have a thought, a certain perspective, you get a certain feeling as an indicator, then we could also say if someone who is responsible embraces emotional labor, they also embrace the power of perspective. And if you're embracing the power of perspective, you're engaging with all these things, I think it's safe to say you're practicing free and engaged living. So we'll title it the way I titled that quadrant, inspired. Feels a little better, doesn't it? Makes a little more sense. So I'm going to end this lesson up and end this discussion about responsible and the seduction of should with, again, a quote from Stephen Covey. He defines responsibility this way, which I think is a great way to sum up what we've written here. Look at the word responsibility. Response-ability. The ability to choose your response. Highly proactive people recognize that responsibility. They do not blame circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. Their behavior is a product of their own conscious choice based on values rather than a product of their conditions. Take a breath on that. And then once again, take a few moments to have a conversation with yourself. Top 1 to 3 insights.
Stephen Covey's definition of responsibility feels a little better than the definition of responsibility we started this lesson off with, doesn't it? And we're not letting bondage off the hook yet. In the next lesson, I'll be revealing bondage's dirty little secret. To find out what it is, head over to the next video, Module 4, Lesson 3.